2020 was a tough year for most of the world, and an exceedingly tough year here in the US. Between national protests and a global pandemic that shut down businesses in the majority of the country and all over the world, a lot of people were suffering in many different ways. Many of us struggled to find ways to make the best out of what 2020 was giving us. Some would decide to use the time that they ordinarily would have spent working to accomplish other personal goals and dreams that they didn't have the time for previously. In October, one such person who was using this newly imposed downtime to experience the beauty of our national parks disappeared. For nearly 2 weeks, many search and rescue parties were sent out to find her, and her family was left in an emotional limbo that nobody should ever have to experience. Thankfully, this individual was located, but the location she was found in and other factors of her rescue raised even more questions. As the public anxiously awaited more details, we came to find out that many of those answers we were waiting for were just going to remain seriously mysterious. I'm John Lordan, and today we're covering another case that many people are divided on: the disappearance and subsequent rescue of Holly Courtier. Lying at the junction of the Colorado Plateau, Great Basin, and Mojave Desert, Zion National Park is a vast 229 square mile stretch of land that hosts a variety of different topographies and wildlife. It is a unique and beautiful area, made only more so by the various canyons that run through it. As of 2019, the park receives about 4 million visitors a year, with several shuttles regularly available to help visitors make their way to and from the park. Holly Suzanne Courtier was a 39-year-old resident of California who had visited Zion National Park once before with her daughter Kaylee. The two had gone on a sort of mother-daughter bonding adventure to celebrate Kaylee's 19th birthday a few months prior to her disappearance, and had specifically explored a section of the park known as the Narrows. According to the National Park Service website, the Narrows is one of the most popular areas to hike in the park. The canyon walls in this area are 20 to 30 feet wide, hence the name, but those same walls are also up to 1,000 feet tall, making it a truly spectacular piece of nature. Holly and Kaylee seemed to have a wonderful time on their trip. The smiles and joyous expressions captured on their faces in several photographs are just unmistakable. Kaylee later stated that her mother told her at one point, "I've never been this close to God." While this wasn't exactly an unusual statement for Holly to make, her family describes her in numerous articles as being spiritual. It was clear that Zion had made a lasting impression on her. Holly Courtier was one of the many individuals whose jobs were affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. At one point, she had been a nanny, but once the family that she was working for was unable to pay her, according to Kaylee, Holly made a positive thing and said that gave her time to go out and see the parks. Although she had a converted van for this purpose, it seems as though she was generally staying close enough to her home in California to have dinner with her family from time to time. In early October, one of those dinners occurred, and according to Holly's sister, Jillian Oliver, Holly just wasn't eating. She was fasting, which is something that she did do with some regularity. Although Holly didn't mention that she was planning to go to Zion, Jillian claimed that she seemed to be in a good mood. Jillian told reporters about that evening, saying, quote, "She gave me a big hug and said, 'I love you so much.' She seemed a little choked up, like she wasn't going to see us for maybe a few weeks or something." And just like that, Holly was out the door. By October 6th, she had parked her vehicle in Springdale and was on a shuttle bus in Utah, headed for a drop-off location in Zion National Park that is popularly known as the Grotto. She was last seen departing the bus at around 1:30 p.m. wearing a gray Pistol brand trucker hat, a Patagonia black nanopuff jacket, a dark tank top, gray hiking boots, and she was carrying a blue multi-day hiking pack. According to the initial bulletin posted about her on the National Park Service website, Holly was due to catch the shuttle out of the grotto at 4:40 p.m. that same day. She didn't arrive. And although Park Services made a note of this, she wasn't actually reported missing until October 9th, when her roommate back in California became concerned. Investigators traced her credit card activity and discovered that she'd paid the entry fee to the park. Prior to that discovery, her friends and family had been completely unaware that Holly had even traveled to Utah. Park authorities, law enforcement, and Holly's family sprang into action. It was revealed that she may have also brought a large multicolored blanket and a camouflaged hammock with her, but nobody knew whether or not she had brought any food or water. Time was clearly of the essence, and soon the story of the missing woman in Zion National Park was making headlines all across the country. Holly's daughter, Kaylee, reached out to media outlets relentlessly, telling CNN, "We need more volunteers to help us search, more hikers, rock climbers, and trail guides." Even though temperatures in the area hadn't dipped below the 50s since her disappearance, with every day that passed, Kaylee's concern increased. "I refuse to give up on her because I know she wouldn't give up on me. If I could say anything to her, I would say, just keep fighting," Kaylee told the press. Then, on October 18th, it seems those words rang true. According to the statement issued by Park Services, Holly Courtier was located alive in a thickly vegetated area along the Virgin River after a credible tip was called in by a park visitor who claimed to have seen her. Apparently, a little boy and his mother had seen Holly's hammock and called it in. Considering that the hammock was noted as being camouflaged, that's a pretty impressive feat. Holly had been in the park for 12 days at that point, and the area that she was found at was roughly half a mile from where she had been dropped off by the shuttle on the 6th. What exactly had prevented her from leaving the park? Didn't she hear the numerous search parties calling for her? Although everybody was grateful that she had been returned to her family, many soon wondered what exactly had happened in Zion National Park to Holly Courtier. Almost as soon as those questions began to be asked, pieces of what had happened made their way to the media through Holly's daughter, Kaylee. Apparently, while setting up her hammock on the 6th, Holly had hit the back of her head on a tree, and she became disoriented. This injury, combined with the fact that she had been fasting in the days leading up to her journey and had brought no food and very little water with her, meant that she was in a pretty dire situation. According to Kaylee's statement to CNN, she was unable to take more than a step or two without collapsing. This prevented her from being able to seek out help. She told me she was so dehydrated she couldn't open her mouth. Desperate, Holly found the closest water source that she could, which happened to be the Virgin River, and elected to stay close to it, figuring that that would better her chances of being found. Interestingly enough, the Virgin River leads to the area of the park that Holly had previously visited with her daughter, the Narrows. Perhaps she had intentionally found this particular location, but maybe it was just the luck of the draw. Either way, this is where Holly allegedly stayed, marking the days that passed on a nearby tree with a Sharpie that she had brought in her pack. When she was found, Holly was reportedly able to walk out of the park, quote, of her own capability with minimal assistance, according to the statement made by the National Park Service. Her family drove her to a nearby emergency room themselves, where she was swiftly examined. Upon examination, it was discovered that she had lost 15 pounds during her ordeal, and her kidneys had begun the early stages of actually shutting down. 2 more days alone, and it's likely that Holly would have been dead. Still, this courageous story of a woman's survival within nature against the odds raised a few eyebrows. One such skeptic was the Washington County Sheriff's Search and Rescue Sergeant Daryl Cashin. Cashin has been the Washington County Search and Rescue Liaison since 2011, and he's been going out on search and rescue calls since the early 90s. Although Cashin's team had minimal involvement when it came to Holly's eventual rescue, they had assisted as an additional resource when it came to advice and ideas on what else could be done to secure her safe return. When he read the statements that Kaylee had been making to the media and compared them to the statements issued by the National Park Service, he was quick to notice some discrepancies between the two sources. As previously mentioned, Kaylee had told the media that her mother had been in such bad condition that she had hardly been able to walk. How then, Cashin wondered, had Holly been able to leave the park with minimal assistance, as per the Park Service's statement? If she had truly been in that bad a shape, Wouldn't it have made sense for her to be transported by ambulance to the nearest hospital rather than being driven by her family? This doesn't make sense, Cashin was quoted as saying. They apparently talked to her and felt she was okay to be released to the family. Then there was the matter of the water source that Holly had decided to stay close to, the Virgin River. Apparently, it's a fairly well-known fact that there is toxic cyanobacteria in the river water, making it extremely unfit for human consumption. According to Cashin, if she had been drinking that water, unless she had some really high immune system, she would have been very, very ill and probably unable to come out on her own. He also added that if Holly had indeed been so dehydrated that she couldn't open her mouth, especially considering she'd been missing for nearly 2 weeks, her odds of survival would have decreased dramatically. When Cashin's questions were raised, social media and the general media alike latched back onto the story, suddenly wondering how legitimate the details of Holly's survival actually were. Even local law enforcement issued a statement regarding the matter, with the Washington County Sheriff's Office saying that their office stood by the observations and statements made by Cashin, although he was merely a consultant who was giving an expert opinion. Holly's family was wholly unprepared for the media frenzy that Cashin's questions elicited, and the personal attacks lauded upon them in comments and messages on social media were practically never-ending. In an interview with USA Today, Holly's sister, Jamie Strong, stated that family members had to delete or heavily restrict their social media accounts and even change their phone numbers to avoid what they called exponential amounts of hate mail. Much like the Sherry Papini case, as quickly as the internet had been on Holly's family's side in the search for her, the tables had turned, and words like hoax, crazy, and scammer were suddenly being spewed at them. It was then that more information about Holly's time in the park made its way out to the general public. As her sister Jamie said, there are not holes in the story. There are no discrepancies. It just got blown very out of proportion. According to Jamie, and a statement made on the GoFundMe page that had been set up during the active search, Holly had suffered from unspecified mental health issues in the past. She definitely was having a mental breakdown, Jamie told USA Today. She told us later she was seeking a total disconnect from everything. She really just wanted to be alone. She had no idea it would turn into anything or the worry she would cause or what it would become. To Holly, the trip was a way to sort of get in touch with herself and the world around her. Jamie also added, "She has definitely been through some trauma over the past several years. I don't think she's properly dealt with it and gotten the proper help for it, and now is the time." Although she had been fasting in the days leading up to her arrival in Zion, Holly told her sister that she had overexerted herself on her first day in the park, causing her to become very weak early on in her adventure. When she hit her head after setting up her hammock, she was made especially vulnerable. Luckily, when Holly found the Virgin River, she happened to know about the toxic cyanobacteria, and she only used the water to wet her mouth from time to time. Though this was helpful, it was not enough for Holly to be able to call out for help when she did see another person at one point in the park. Then there was the matter of how much assistance Holly had actually required when she was found and extracted from the park. While the National Park Service had stated that assistance was minimal, according to Jamie, Holly had to stop and rest about every 5 feet as she was being led back to safety, with a ranger standing behind her to make sure that she stayed upright. She was incredibly weak, scared, and ultimately quite traumatized, and so her family decided that it was best for them to drive her to the emergency room rather than subjecting her to an ambulance ride. At the hospital, Holly was diagnosed with a concussion and was treated for famine, dehydration, and foot injuries due to the cold. It took a few days for solid food to be reincorporated into her diet again. Truly, it seemed as though this woman, who had gone on a spiritual journey of sorts, had been saved by whatever powers that be she was seeking out there. Another large point of contention between the general online community and Holly's family was the GoFundMe that had been set up while she was still missing. In those 12 days, the fundraiser had managed to raise over $12,000. And when cash and statements began circulating, many pointed to the possibility of Holly's disappearance being some sort of scam for money. In an interview, Jamie explained that she had originally set up the account for friends and family to donate for search efforts, but as the case received national attention, anonymous donors and people from all over the country were chipping in, us here at LordanArts included. She added an update to the account after the media frenzy began, writing, "We acknowledge and respect people's concerns over the many inaccuracies portrayed by the press and social media regarding Holly's ordeal. Whoever has concerns about our use of their donation is welcome to request a refund without any objection from the family." Regarding the GoFundMe situation, the Sheriff's Department had this to say, quote, "Numerous tips have been received indicating the incident was possibly conceived and carried out as part of a plan to generate money to a GoFundMe account for Courtier's recovery. At this point in the investigation, there has been no evidence to support the theory that the incident was committed intentionally as an effort to achieve financial gain." Honestly, perhaps Holly Courtier's disappearance is less mysterious than some would like it to be. Despite the cries of hoax and scam, the simplest explanation may indeed be that Holly Courtier went on a soul-searching journey in a less than desirable state of mind. It's entirely possible that Holly was weak from hunger, weakened further by a head injury, and simply didn't want to risk getting lost deeper within the vastness of her surroundings or becoming injured any further. It's also possible that she was weakened emotionally to the point of not being able to or even wanting to seek help. Isn't that something that we can all empathize with? It's not often that we get this kind of ending when somebody goes missing, and maybe through all the chaos that 2020 presented us with, the fact that Holly Courtier was able to be reunited with her loved ones can serve as a bright spot. If she was stuck out there, either physically or emotionally, she now has another chance at happiness, and we have a family that doesn't have to grieve a tragic loss. If this was an elaborate cry for help, many people heard the call and stepped forward. I don't think there's anything seriously mysterious about that. If you're enjoying this show, please check out Seriously Mysterious, the podcast. We have over 150 episodes waiting for you.